The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Shadows stretched across the field, taking shape like the fingers of a long-forgotten ghost. To the untrained eye, the farm appeared abandoned. Weeds thrived in the rows where crops had once flourished. Dust settled thick on broken fences, and the old barn leaned as if it were holding its breath, waiting for someone to save it. On this forgotten land, a story was about to unfold, a drama that lay hidden beneath the surface. On this particular evening, a car rolled to a stop at the edge of the property. Three figures emerged, two teenagers, eager and reckless, and a slightly hesitant friend trailing behind. They had heard the rumors, the whispers of a haunted farm that had been deserted for years. This place held tales of shadowy figures and strange noises, captivating curious hearts and mischievous minds. They were drawn in by the thrill, the promise of a forgotten adventure. As they crept forward, their laughter echoed across the field, mingling with the haunting rustle of the wind. Outwardly, the farm was lifeless, but something stirred beneath the surface. In the dim light, hidden behind the weathered barn door, a pair of eyes watched. Silenced by the years, they held wisdom, memories, and a fierce protectiveness. The farmer, old Jacob, was still very much a part of this land. Life had not abandoned his property. He had simply chosen to step back, retreating into quietude. Jacob had spent decades pouring sweat and blood into the ground. There had been seasons of joy when the harvest overflowed, and seasons of despair when storms ripped through his fields, yet he persisted, driven by a love for the land. When his wife Mary passed, the heart that once pulsed vigorously with hope began to slow. He didn't abandon the farm, he allowed it to reflect his own sorrow. As the teenagers approached the barn, Jacob felt an unsettling energy, an intrusion upon his sanctuary. They pushed the door open, the rusted hinges creaking in protest. A rush of cold air enveloped them like an unexpected chill, and they stepped cautiously inside. The dust hung thick, swirling in the fading light, blurring the untouched relics of a life once vibrant. One of the boys exclaimed, pointing to an old farm tool. Its age and rust screamed of neglect, yet it whispered stories of 100 seasons past. Their voices echoed, mocking the stillness, unaware of the solitary figure just outside, hidden in the shadows. Jacob tightened his grip on his old hunting rifle. He had lived long enough to recognize the reckless nature of youth, a blend of bravado and ignorance. They weren't here to appreciate the legacy of hard work and history. They were on the brink of trespassing into his grief. Inside the barn, one girl spotted an old tractor, a relic from better days. She declared, giggling as she climbed onto the driver's seat. The boy joined her, an impetuous spirit igniting his excitement. They captured the moment, unaware of the significance behind their actions. Everything they touched, everything they laughed about, belonged to someone who once stood where they were now, someone who cherished this place more than words could convey. Outside, Jacob's heart raced. He had thought his days of confrontation were long over. He had given up on the noise of the world. But this was different. Something primal stirred within him. It wasn't just about protecting his property. It was a deep-rooted instinct to protect his past and the memory of Mary, who had loved this land as much as he did. His fingers brushed the cool metal of the rifle as he remembered the laughter that once filled that barn, Mary's laughter, bright and full of life. It cut through his nostalgia, sharp and demanding. He had envisioned many things for this farm, but the presence of intruders was never one of them. A fire burned in his chest as he stepped out of the shadows, resolved to remind them of the soul that lingered in every corner of his land. Back inside the barn, the energy shifted. The laughter dulled, replaced by a sense of foreboding as an inexplicable chill swirled around them. The girl asked, her smile fading. The boy shrugged, though the excitement drained from his veins. They fell silent. The atmosphere around them thickened like a fog creeping in. Suddenly, a harsh voice shattered the stillness. It resonated through the barn, echoing off the walls. The trio spun around, caught in shock. Jacob stood there, the embodiment of the land, weathered, strong, and fiercely protectant. Fear gripped their hearts, tightening their throats. The boy tried to speak, stuttering words that sputtered and fizzled. He managed to say, though the sincerity was lost amidst the tension. Jacob's eyes narrowed, the weight of years resting heavily upon his shoulders. "You think this land is abandoned?" His voice was rough, the bark of a man who had weathered life's storms. The questions echoed deeper, prodding at their conscience. The girl stepped forward, her bravado returning like a flickering flame. "We didn't mean any harm." Jacob scoffed, anger boiling just below the surface. "You think silence means neglect? This land still breathes, whether you choose to see it or not." He took a step closer, and they instinctively recoiled. They had entered a realm they couldn't fathom. The farm wasn't just land, it was a tapestry woven with history, joys, and suffering, all present in the rustling leaves and worn tools. For a moment, the teens were rooted in place, grappling with the weight of the man's words. They didn't just stand before a farmer, they faced a guardian of stories many had forgotten, a holder of emotions that swirled in the air like dust particles glinting in the low light. The tension grew heavy, the air thick with unspoken feelings. Jacob observed their shifting reactions, the flicker of regret on the boy's face, the realization in the girl's eyes. Perhaps childhood dreams had been naive, the thrill they sought now tainted by understanding. The girl finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Her voice trailed off, but the sincerity lay bare before him. Jacob shifted, his heart softening slightly. This land is a part of me, just like it was a part of Mary. His voice cracked, betraying the vulnerability beneath his hardened exterior. With those words, a connection forged itself between them. The teens glanced at each other, understanding the gravity of their actions. "No, we wouldn't," the boy finally admitted, the defiance draining from his posture. "We're sorry." The silence hung between them, pregnant with possibilities. Here was a moment not just of confrontation, but of bridging the divide between two worlds. Jacob relaxed his grip around the rifle, sensing the shift. Their guilt wove its way into the fabric of the evening, and for the first time in years, he felt a connection. Jacob took a deep breath, deciding to lower the weapon. "Well then, you're here now." Her eyes widened, surprise overcoming their initial fear. Could this man, this guardian of the land, actually want to share in its story? Perhaps they hadn't stumbled upon an abandoned farm, but rather a living testament to perseverance. Jacob guided them through the barn, recounting stories of seasons gone by, underlining the significance of each worn tool and faded photograph. They listened enraptured as he spoke of planting seeds and watching them rise, the laughter in summer, the heartache of storms. Each tale pulled them deeper into the richness of the farm's history. For the first time, the teenagers found themselves mesmerized. Their laughter faded, replaced by reverence. They hadn't just trespassed, they had been invited into something sacred, glimpsing a world alive with love and loss. As twilight deepened, casting a blanket of stars above, they left the barn, a new bond forged in understanding. The farm, once a canvas of neglect, now teemed with stories. Jacob felt his heart swell with hope. It pulsed anew with the life of the land, beating in time with the young spirits surrounding him. In this forgotten place, where memories clung like the evening mist, all of their lives intertwined in the exhale of an unsuspecting moment. Jacob realized the choice he had made wasn't just about protecting the past, it was about embracing the future. Perhaps this wasn't just his land any longer. It was a tapestry waiting to expand, woven with the dreams of those willing to listen, to learn. The night embraced them, vast and infinite, but within its arms lay a promise that even amid silence, a legacy was never truly deserted. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the sprawling expanse of an old farm. Cracked fences leaned precariously, the paint peeling from weather-beaten barns that stood like weary sentinels against time. To the average passerby, the scene was static, a relic of a bygone era. It seemed deserted, lost to the annals of memory. But what the trespassers didn't realize was that they were not alone. Hidden within the labyrinth of rusting tools and faded memories, a pair of watchful eyes observed from behind the crumbling walls. Somewhere in that fading light, the laughter of three teenagers broke the eerie quiet. They had heard the whispered tales of this place, a haunted farm where shadows danced and secrets shrieked from the past. But all they saw was an opportunity for adventure. It was like a siren's call, luring them in with the promise of the unknown. They parked their car at the edge of the property, hearts racing with a blend of excitement and mischief. One of the boys exclaimed, his voice tinged with bravado. They clambered over the rotting fence, pulling themselves onto the grounds that, unbeknownst to them, held stories woven into its very soil. Little did they know, a presence lingered, an invisible guardian watching their every move. As they made their way toward the barn, dust billowed around their sneakers, stirred up from years of neglect. They dashed inside, the door creaking ominously as if protesting the intrusion. The dim light filtered through cracked windows, spilling rays across forgotten tools and scattered hay. The air was thick with the scent of age and silence, a sanctuary long ignored. Shouted one girl, jumping onto an old tractor. She posed dramatically, striking a silly face as her friends laughed and joined her. The laughter echoed through the barn, bouncing off the walls, mingling with the ghosts of laughter that once filled the space long ago. They didn't see the dust motes dance in the shafts of sunlight. They didn't hear the whispers of memories swirling in the air. All they saw were selfies and fleeting fame. Outside, Jacob the farmer stood hidden behind the main barn, his heart thudding in his chest. He hadn't turned a blind eye to the decay. He simply let the world pass by, choosing solitude after losing his wife Lydia years earlier. The farm was all he had left, an echo of their life together. Even in the darkness, he clutched his old rifle tightly, an emblem of protection, a link to a history he couldn't let go. As he watched the teenagers trample through his sanctuary, anger surged within him. They were not just trespassers, they were unwitting intruders throwing rocks at the fragile glass of his past. Inside the barn, the trio explored, their voices bubbling with excitement and reckless abandon. But as they rummaged through abandoned tools and cobweb-covered corners, the air shifted. A sensation of unease began to descend, a chill that wrapped around them like an unwanted cloak. They paused, glancing at each other, confusion creeping into their smiles. Whispered the girl, her bravado faltering. "Just the wind," said the boy dismissively, though its ominous touch lingered. In that moment, Jacob moved, a shadow gliding stealthily toward the barn door. He knew he had to confront them. This was not just a farm, it was a tapestry woven from the threads of love, labor, and loss. He stepped into the light, his silhouette striking against the fading sun. His voice sliced through the silence, deep and gravelly, waiting for their response. They froze, the weight of his words crashing upon their youthful bravado like a sudden storm. The girl's heart raced, her pulse drumming loudly in her ears. She stammered. Jacob's eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed. "You think this place is just another abandoned haunt for your amusement? This is home." The word home hung in the air, heavy with emotion. It struck a chord deep within him that threatened to break free. The teenagers exchanged glances, their initial thrill evaporating amid the gravity of his presence. They hadn't just stepped onto his land, they had stumbled into a world of hurt and history. The boy braved a step forward, trying to regain his lost confidence. "We didn't know anyone lived here." Jacob's heart sank at their ignorance. Just because it's silent doesn't mean it's forgotten. Many things linger in the quiet memories, love, pain. The trio stood still, the air thickening with tension. They had come seeking thrills, but were now face to face with something much deeper. It hit them. This was not just a farm abandoned by time, it was a living memorial. The girl asked quietly, her voice softening. "Jacob," he replied, his gaze steady, gauging their sincerity. "Jacob," she echoed, as if saying it could make the weight dissipate. We didn't mean any harm." Jacob considered their words, the vulnerability in their eyes. He hadn't planned on sharing his burden, yet they were here in front of him. The farm, buried under layers of grief, could perhaps reveal a part of itself to them. "I'll show you," Jacob finally said, surprising even himself. The teenagers exchanged glances, uncertainty mingling with intrigue. One by one, they stepped closer, curiosity overtaking their fear. As they entered the barn once more, Jacob began to share stories, his voice unveiling the long-hidden layers of the farm. He told them about the first time he and Lydia had planted seeds together beneath the golden sun, hands entwined in shared dreams. He described the joy of a flourishing harvest, the laughter ringing through the air like a beautiful melody. With every story, he invited them into his world, each tale emphasizing the love that dwelled within the walls they had once mocked. Painted the struggles, the storms literal and metaphorical that had threatened their lives but had never erased the bond they shared with the land. Their laughter faded, replaced by genuine interest. They began to see beyond the dust and decay. They understood this was not an abandoned farm, it was a sanctuary, alive with stories of hope and heartache. The girl felt tears prick her eyes as Jacob spoke. "It's easy to overlook what's right in front of you," she whispered, a newfound respect blooming within her. Jacob nodded, his heart softening further. It's never too late to appreciate what you have, even if it seems distant or broken. The sun dipped lower, now a crimson ball on the horizon, mixing its colors with the shades of their heavy hearts. They shared a moment of unity. This farm, once an old tale whispered among friends, had transformed. It breathed, it pulsed, and now a piece of it lived in them too. The boy asked, determination flickering in his voice. Jacob looked at them, a glimmer of hope igniting behind his weary eyes. For the first time in years, perhaps they could breathe new life into the sorrow that had lingered too long. That evening, under the painted sky, they worked side by side, teens and farmer alike. They claimed, laughed, and reminisced, Jacob guiding them through what it meant to love the land like Lydia had. Together, they unearthed weeds that choked the soil. Each root they pulled symbolizing an old pain given room to heal. As darkness fell, the barn transformed. No longer just a relic of time, it brimmed with stories and laughter, a renewed pulse resonating through its walls. When the stars began to twinkle overhead, Jacob realized that they had breathed fresh air into his haven. The silence felt different now, not empty but full, welcoming the echoes of the past and the laughter of new beginnings. They stood together, breathless and covered in dust, looking out over the fields that had once seemed desolate. In the quiet, they felt a warmth, a thread that wove them all together. There amidst the weeds, the farm was no longer just Jacob's burden. It had transformed into a shared legacy, a beacon of camaraderie brought forth by trespassers who dared to enter its heart. After that night, Jacob never felt alone again. The once abandoned farm had rekindled its spirit, alive with the tales of the present and the whispers of the past. The shadows now bore witness to something beautiful, a dance of memories intertwined with hope, no longer relegated to silence. And there, under the endless sky, they forged a bond that would carry through the seasons, a precious reminder that even the most deserted places can be awakened by newfound love and understanding. The sun hung high above, casting golden rays across an expansive field that once teemed with life. From a distance, the farm looked lost, a forgotten relic swallowed by time. Weeds waved like wild hair through the one straight rows of corn, and the barn leaned precariously, a shadow of its former self. A rustic sign creaked in the gentle breeze, Carter's Farm, but to the untrained eye, the only thing left was an echo of desolation. A rusty pickup truck ambled down the long gravel drive, tires crunching over stones that had known only silence for years. Inside were three teenagers, young and wild with reckless abandon, driven by curiosity and the thrill of discovery. They had heard the rumors, a tale spun among friends about the haunted farm on the outskirts of town. The stories promised ghosts, strange noises, and hidden treasures buried beneath the overgrown landscape. Little did they know they were not alone, and their adventure would awaken something dormant. As they leaped from the truck, laughter bubbled up, bright and carefree. They bolted toward the weathered barn, the sun illuminating their eager faces. To them, this was the ultimate playground, a chance to escape the mundane and embrace the adventure of the unknown. Each step drew them further into the farm's forlorn beauty, and yet one pair of eyes watched their every move with an intensity that belied the eerie quiet. Jacob Carter, the farmer, stood hidden in the shadows of the barn, cloaked in the memories of better days. He had spent decades nurturing this land, pouring his love into the soil that now seemed to spit back weeds instead of crops. He had built the barn with his own hands, hung the sign that now looked weary. Though the teenagers saw an abandoned playground, Jacob felt the weight of sorrow and loss pressing down on his shoulders, a burden he had carried since Lydia, his wife, had passed away. From his vantage point, Jacob could see them clear as day, youthful and brimming with excitement, completely unaware of the storm brewing within him. The laughter danced in the air, juxtaposed against the stillness of the farm, and with it came memories that flooded through him like a tidal wave. He could hear Lydia's laughter ringing in his ears from days long gone. The farm had been a sanctuary, once a place of shimmer and life, love and laughter. Now it seemed forgotten, left to rot in the shadows of his grief. As the teenagers flung open the barn doors, the booming creak echoed like a gunshot, slicing through the silence. Dust motes caught the light, swirling around them like miniature stars. With reckless energy, they pranced inside, eager to explore the remnants of a life they could not comprehend. Old tools leaned against the walls, tired and rusty, but to the trio, they were relics of adventure waiting to be claimed. One of the boys grinned, hoisting a broken pitchfork above his head like a prize. Girl piped up, her excitement electric, as she clambered onto an old tractor with a squeal, striking poses full of bravado. They were loud, alive, unaware that every laugh echoed against the very walls that had once cradled the essence of family and warmth. Jacob felt a jolt of anger, an instinct to protect what was left of his world, yet he remained silent. Instead, he watched, conflicted as the laughter tore through the heart of his memories. Suddenly, a hair-raising creak shattered the jubilance. The floorboard beneath the girls shifted. The boys froze, their eyes wide with shock. One stammered, glancing nervously towards the barn door, and there it was again, a low rumble, like the farm itself grumbling against the intrusion. "Just the old barn settling," the girl said, though her voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in. Jacob stepped from the shadows, the sun cutting through the barn door behind him. The sight of him seemed to silence the very air. He stood tall, weathered, a man whose years etched stories deep into his skin. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Fear flashed in their eyes, and the thrill that once filled the air evaporated like morning dew. The boy tightened his grip on the pitchfork, confusion flickering across his face. Jacob felt their unease, and for a heartbeat he questioned his own instinct to confront or to retreat. We thought this place was abandoned," the girl whispered, bravely taking a step forward. Jacob's gaze hardened. "This farm isn't just a playground for your thrills." They exchanged looks, processing the weight of his words. In that moment, Jacob felt a crack in his defenses. The anger began to ebb, revealing a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, these trespassers could learn something about the land he loved. "We want to help," the boy said suddenly, laying down the pitchfork as if lowering a shield. Jacob studied them, the shadows and light playing across their youthful faces. They were reckless, yes, but there was sincerity in their eyes. Perhaps this was a moment to share, to teach, not just about the land, but about loss, resilience, and the rhythm of life that pulled through even the darkest days. With a reluctant sigh, Jacob softened. "If you truly wish to help, then come. Let me show you what this farm really means." As the sun dipped lower, the golden light drenched the fields, casting a soft glow on the memories that lay deeply rooted in the soil. Together, they stepped out into the twilight world that spread before them like an open book. Each step stirred the air, rich with promise and echoes of the past. Jacob took them from the barn to the overgrown fields, explaining the stories behind the crops that used to thrive there. He showed them the patch where they had planted tomatoes, the rows where lettuce had danced under the sun. He spoke of seasons of toil, of rain that nourished and droughts that tested his will. The teens listened, the weight of his words settling in their hearts. They were no longer just trespassers, they were witnesses to a heritage, a legacy held together by love and sweat. The girl said quietly, "It's beautiful here." Jacob nodded. "This land holds life and loss. It's a cycle, but it needs care to thrive. I lost my wife here, and since then I've let it fall." The boy looked up, uncharacteristically serious. "But you can make it better again, can't you?" A flicker of warmth spread through Jacob's chest, igniting the dormant spark of hope he had buried deep. They worked through the evening, weeding, cleaning, and chopping down broken branches that had long hidden the beauty beneath. With every pull of a weed, Jacob felt a weight lift, not only off the land but from his heart. For the first time in years, he found himself laughing along with them, sharing stories that stirred the spirit of the farm back to life. As twilight settled in, they returned to the barn, the air buzzing with new energy. Jacob introduced them to the tools of the trade, how to mend fences and plant seeds, teaching them the art of nurturing. He took pains to explain each tool as if they were characters in a story, guiding them through the steps of resurrection. "We can bring this place back," the girl declared, her eyes radiant with excitement. Her enthusiasm might just be what this place needs, Jacob said, a smile tugging at his lips for the first time in years. That night, the stars twinkled overhead, casting shimmering reflections onto the now bustling farm below. Laughter filled the air, teens and farmer alike, uniting under the celestial blanket. They shared stories and dreams, hopes woven into a night that felt richer by the moment. As the fire crackled and embers floated into the night, Jacob caught glimpses of a future he thought lost. The shadows that once swirled around the farm began to lift, revealing a canvas on which new memories could be painted. Days turned into weeks, and the three teenagers returned again and again. They now saw the farm not just as a haunted place, but as a living, breathing entity thankful for their presence. Their reckless curiosity morphed into hard work, sweat mingling with laughter, exchanging stories under the wide-open sky. Each day, Jacob felt the burden on his heart light, as if the land was repaying him for every moment of care and love he had invested over the years. The teenagers worked tirelessly, a new generation breathing life back into a legacy that had stood still for far too long. And so, on a day bathed in golden light, the once abandoned farm transformed. Rows of fresh crops peeked through the soil, laughter filled the air, and the walls of the barn, once silent, sang a different tune, one of resilience, revitalization, and hope. As the sun began to set one evening, casting a warm glow over the fields, Jacob stood on the porch watching. The teenagers were racing through the rows of newly planted crops, the thrills still bubbling between them. It was loud and wild, but it was a beautiful symphony of life to his ears. In that moment, under the canvas of twilight, Jacob realized the truth. They had not just revived the farm, they had awakened him from the slumber of grief. With the sound of their laughter swirling around him, the ghosts of the past no longer felt oppressive. Instead, they walked alongside him, whispering a message of love, endurance, and new beginnings. He turned and smiled at the vibrant energy spilling over the fields. The farm had become a legend again, but this time, it was alive with stories yet to come, stories of friendship, of healing, and of the power that brings people and places back to life. And as darkness fell, it wasn't just the night that wrapped around them, but the silent promise of a shared future where no one would ever feel alone again. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the field where weeds waved lazily in the evening breeze. To anyone standing at the edge of the property, the old farm seemed deserted, like a page torn from a forgotten book. Windows were cracked and dusty, the barn drooped in disrepair as if weighed down by years of neglect. But beneath this veneer of abandonment, someone watched. Three teenagers, full of youthful thrill and mischief, parked their battered car by the rusty gates that swung open with a creak. They had heard stories whispered in hushed tones about haunted places, whispered tales of spirits and treasures waiting to be unearthed. Eager to forge their own adventure, they spilled out of the car, hearts racing with the excitement of exploration. One shouted, the thrill of the unknown tugging at their adventurous spirits. Together they climbed over an old, rotting fence, not knowing they were trespassing on a heart that still beat, still held memories. As they approached the barn, laughter danced through the air, intoxicating their senses. The wind rustled through the weeds, as if warning them of the life that still lingered among the ruins. Inside the barn, the scent of musty hay and thyme washed over them, filling their lungs. Dust motes spiraled in the shafts of light that broke through the barn's worn walls. One boy exclaimed, clambering onto the driver's seat like a victorious pirate claiming a ship. The girl shouted, her eyes glimmering with delight. They gathered around, posing and laughing, completely oblivious to the life watching them from the shadows just beyond the barn door. Jacob Carter, the farmer, stood silently, hidden behind the barn's mildewed walls. Years of quiet toil etched deeply into his weathered face. He had watched this land flourish alongside his late wife, however. After her passing, the vibrance had dulled, much like the barn itself. And now, having retreated into solitude, he found himself yearning for the days when laughter and love filled the very space these trespassers had invaded. As he listened to their childish banter, Jacob felt a surge of emotions cascade over him. Anger bubbled beneath the surface. These kids, without understanding, thought of his home as merely a playground. He gripped the rough wood of the barn's door, fighting the urge to confront them. What would he say? How could he show them the depth of what this place truly meant? Inside, the trio continued their antics, flipping through abandoned tools, mocking what they didn't understand. One of the boys held up an old, rusted pitchfork, its jagged edges dulled by dust. He laughed. The other boy chimed in, chuckling, but laughter quickly faded as a cold draft slipped through the cracks of the barn. The girl asked, suddenly uneasy, her voice barely above a whisper. She scanned the dimly lit room, the laughter silenced for an instant. Just the wind, said the boy, although the nervousness in his voice betrayed him. He was trying hard to suppress the prickly sensation creeping up his spine. Outside, Jacob braced himself, feeling the wind change direction, swirling around him like an enemy pulling him down. He could see their fleeting joy and how easily it faded into uncertainty. It rekindled something inside him, protective instinct, a desire to show them that this land was not just a canvas for pranks, but a living entity. Without thinking, he pushed the barn door ajar, the groan of the hinges cutting through the silence. The teenagers froze, their laughter wiped clean from their faces. Jacob's voice thundered, each word rolling off his tongue like gravel. Eyes widened, pulses raced, and silence reigned. Fear wrapped tightly around the trio, choking their laughter as they stepped back instinctively. "We were," the girl stammered, her bravado crumbling under Jacob's intense gaze. Jacob stepped forward, a figure carved from the very earth itself, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "You think this place is abandoned?" Taken aback, they looked at one another, their confidence melted away like ice on a sunny day. We didn't know anyone lived here," one of the boys finally admitted, his voice faltering. "It's a farm," Jacob replied, the edge returning to his tone. "Just because it looks empty doesn't mean it is." A heavy stillness settled around them, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. The teenagers exchanged glances, uncertainty bare on their faces. They hadn't just stumbled onto a rundown piece of land, they had intruded on something sacred, something that pulsated with life and heartache. The girl asked, her voice softened with curiosity, tempered by the weight of the encounter. "Jacob," he replied, sizing them up. "I'm Hannah," she said, extending a hand hesitantly, as if reaching out across an invisible chasm. He hesitated, then shook her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch. It was a small gesture, but a crack in the walls that once barricaded his heart. "And this is Matt and Ryan," she gestured to her friends. Jacob asked, his voice less aggressive, more weary. Ryan blurted out, his voice rising a notch. "We just thought it was cool." Jacob's anger began to dissipate, replaced by the weariness of a life spent alone. He flicked his gaze around the barn, returning to each teenager's face. "This place is filled with history. It's my life, my wife's life." A flicker of understanding crossed over Hannah's face, reflecting concern, a new layer of depth. "I'm sorry," she said softly, and Matt and Ryan nodded in agreement. Jacob nodded slowly, feeling the tension between them soften, but only slightly. "You're here now. If you really want to know about this place, come closer. Let's show you what it means to care for land that's been loved." They stepped forward cautiously, curious eyes searching his. As they left the barn, Jacob guided them through the remnants of the farm, a tapestry woven with memories stretching back decades. He pointed to the patches of land once filled with strawberries, now choked by weeds. "We used to have a farm stand here. People came from town for fresh fruit, and I'd barter with neighbors." Matt looked at Jacob, a mixture of awe and respect igniting in his eyes. "Wow, I didn't know farming was so." Jacob nodded. "It is, and it's hard work. There's life and loss everywhere you look." Each story poured from Jacob like the very soil they stood on, rich and layered with the lives lived on that land. He told them about the storms that had battered the crops, the nights spent praying for a good harvest. Memories surfaced in waves, lapping against his heart, urging him forward. "Why don't you spend a few days working with me?" Jacob's voice held a challenge, an invitation laced with vulnerability. The teenagers exchanged wide-eyed glances, excitement and uncertainty mingling. "You mean like?" Ryan asked warily. "Exactly," Jacob replied with a ghost of a smile. "You'd be surprised what you can learn, how satisfying it can feel to dig into the earth. Farming isn't just a job." Hannah's hand shot up, genuine enthusiasm dancing in her eyes. "We'd love to." With hesitant laughter, they nodded, the weight of their earlier encounter slowly lifting. They moved toward the fields, ready to transform their wild adventure into labor of heart and hands. Over the next few days, the teenagers threw themselves into the work. They pulled weeds, repaired fences, and even brushed off layers of dirt from forgotten tools. Jacob taught them to plant seeds properly, explaining the delicate balance of nature in every little detail. As they toiled, they shared stories between rows of struggling plants, peeling back layers of their own lives. Jacob opened up about Lydia, sharing tales of their first date in this very field, the laughter of children long gone, and the exhilaration of watching the first sprouts emerge from the ground. The teenagers, who had first come with naive intentions, transformed into willing hearts. They learned not just about farming, but about perseverance, love, and healing through shared labor. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon one evening, Jacob felt something shift within him. In those teens, he saw a glimmer of hope he had thought lost forever. Their laughter rang like music in the air, once again filling the farmhouse with warmth. "Thank you for giving us a chance," Hannah said one night around the flickering fire. "We didn't know about the stories." Jacob felt a lump in his throat. "You've breathed life back into this place." Days turned into weeks, with every moment spent together weaving friendships born from shared experiences. Jacob realized they were no longer trespassers. They had become stewards of the land, standing alongside him in the dance of hardship and hope. And then came the day they announced the first harvest. It wasn't a vast bounty, but it was enough to lay the groundwork for something new. They invited the town, filling the little farm stand with fresh produce that carried Jacob's legacy. Neighbors gathered, laughter mixing with the warm summer air. The farm vibrated with energy, children running between booths and adults exchanging stories just as it had years ago. Jacob stood amid the crowd, feeling something he hadn't felt in ages, a sense of belonging. In the midst of it all, the teenagers stood beside him, sharing proud smiles. Jacob's heart swelled with gratitude, realizing they had drawn him from his solitude. He was not only a farmer again, he was part of a community revitalized, a legacy reborn. As the sun dipped below the horizon one last time that day, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Jacob turned to his young friends. They hadn't just revived his farm, they had seamlessly woven themselves into his life, offering more than he ever envisioned. Amid the laughter, he heard Lydia's voice whispering softly among the echoes. She would have loved this, her laughter filling the air once more, mingling with the joy they had resurrected together. Jacob felt the weight of his grief lighten, no longer an anchor holding him back. This farm, once menacing in its emptiness, now shimmered with the promise of new memories, laughter intertwining with the echoes of the past. Surrounded by life once more, Jacob realized the truth. Even in silence, love perseveres, and even the most forgotten places can be filled with joy again, with the right hearts to breathe life back into them. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays across a weathered landscape. The old farm stood in eerie silence, its fields overgrown and wild, a ghost of what it once had been. To any passerby, it appeared abandoned, left to the whims of nature. But hidden among the shadows was a pair of watchful eyes, Jacob Carter, the farmer and guardian of memories long faded. One afternoon, a rusty old car rattled up the gravel drive, its tires crunching against stones that had known the rhythm of life. Inside were three teenagers, excitement glowing on their faces. They had heard tales of haunted places, whispered rumors of treasures and mysteries just waiting to be discovered. To them, this desolate farm meant adventure. One shouted, his voice filled with bravado as they hopped out of the car. The thrill of the unknown electrified their movements as they bounded toward the barn, oblivious to the history they were about to trample. Jacob stood behind the old barn door, still in his overalls and straw hat, his heart heavy yet alert. He had witnessed life flourish on this land beside his late wife, Lydia, who had once filled the air with laughter and warmth. But since her passing, the farm had turned into a shadowy reminder of lost love, and now trespassers were invading the sanctuary he had retreated into. One of the boys shouted, poking through the dusty remnants piled in the barn. His voice reverberated through the air, mingling with the ghosts of the past. Jacob felt a surge of anger bubble up inside him. This place was sacred, not some playground for thrill-seeking teens. The girl called, her excitement contagious as she stumbled upon an old tractor. She clambered onto the driver's seat, grinning from ear to ear. The other two happily joined her, posing as if they were taking ownership of something that belonged to someone else. They laughed, completely unaware of the life that still pulsed in the soil beneath their feet. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's abandoned, Jacob muttered under his breath. Each burst of their laughter felt like a nail being driven into his heart. The land he had poured his soul into was being violated by ignorance. As if sensing the tension, a cold draft rushed through the barn, sending a shiver down the girl's spine. She asked, glancing nervously around her. "Relax, it's just the wind," Ryan, the bravest of the group, said, though his voice quivered. Jacob took a steadying breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a choice to make, to remain hidden or step into the light and confront them. His anger brewed like a storm, but part of him wanted to reach out, to show them what this land truly meant. With a deep breath, Jacob stepped out from the shadows, the sunlight casting an imposing figure against the backdrop of the old barn. His voice boomed like thunder, filling the empty spaces around them. The teenagers froze, eyes wide as fear replaced laughter. We were just exploring," the girl stammered, her confidence evaporating. Jacob took a step closer, hands on his hips. "You think you can just wander through my land like it's nothing?" The trio exchanged nervous glances, all bravado fading away. We thought it was empty," Matt, one of the boys, mumbled, his past bravado crumbling. Jacob's gaze softened, realizing they had no idea they were trespassing on a place filled with heartache. "This farm isn't abandoned. Every inch of it tells a story, my story and my wife's," he replied, his voice quieter now, yet still heavy with emotion. Questions rippled through Hannah's mind as she searched for words. She finally asked. Jacob felt the weight of her questions settle upon him. "This land was filled with life once. Lydia and I built it together. We had plans, dreams." His voice faltered. "After she passed, I didn't care anymore." The hesitation in his voice struck a chord in the teenagers. They began to see the farm not just as a dilapidated structure, but as a canvas painted with love and loss. They didn't just face a farmer, they confronted the remnants of a life once vibrant. Matt took a deep breath, the sincerity of their situation dawning upon him. "We're really sorry," he said. Jacob studied their faces, their youth illuminated by an urgency he hadn't felt in years. "If you really want to know what this place means, then come closer." They shifted, emotions churning within them. Jacob turned to lead them deeper into the heart of the farm. As they stepped outside into the vibrant light, he opened up, inviting them to share in his burden. "This was our vegetable garden," he said, pointing to a patch now overgrown with weeds. "We used to grow everything here, tomatoes, peppers, herbs. I taught Lydia everything I knew. She had a green thumb, you know." Nostalgia washed over him, warm yet sorrowful. As he spoke, the teenagers could envision the love that had once flourished in the very soil they stood on. They could see Jacob and Lydia, young and filled with hope, digging side by side, laughter ringing through the air. "And this barn," Jacob continued, "is where we repaired our tools, shared our dreams, and held each other during the storms." Watching Jacob's eyes glisten, Hannah felt a shift in her heart. "We never understood," she murmured, "but now it's different." The boys nodded, realizing that the thrill they sought was overshadowed by the responsibility of understanding. Matt blurted out, the words tumbling from him. Jacob turned to them, surprise etched on his face. "You," came the enthusiastic chorus from the teenagers. A warmth unfurled in Jacob's chest, the tentative embers of hope sparked into flame. "All right, let's do this." Days turned into weeks, and the trespassers became dedicated hands in the soil. They yanked weeds, mended fences, and painted the peeling barn. Jacob transformed from a farmer resigned to his grief to a mentor guiding young minds eager to learn. As the sun rose each day, they dug their hands into the warm earth, sharing laughter, stories, and the occasional struggle against backaches. The farm began to hum with the rhythm of life, the pulse of a collective hope fueling their efforts. One evening, as the trio sat on the back porch of the farmhouse, enjoying lemonade and laughter, Jacob felt like he belonged again. Conversations flowed easily, punctuated by the soft chirping of crickets as night danced upon the horizon. "Tell us more about Lydia," Hannah prompted gently. Jacob took a deep breath. "She loved to dance, you know. In the middle of the field, under the stars, we'd twirl around as if no one was watching." Each story painted a vivid picture of love lost, yet the bitterness held within transformed into something sweeter. They became more than just a farmer and his helpers. They became friends, connected by the threads of shared experience. One night, beneath a canopy of stars, Hannah brought out an old guitar she'd been learning to play. She asked, eyes sparkling. Jacob nodded, intrigued. As she strummed, her voice filled the air, soft and beautiful, weaving a melody that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. The song spoke of hope and dreams, of love and loss, a tribute to the laughter and tears that had danced through their lives. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, as if they were all caught in a dream. Then Jacob found himself clapping, loud and heartfelt. He hadn't felt such warmth in so long. "You have a beautiful voice," he said, his heart swelling with pride. "Thanks," Hannah replied, beaming. As the weeks rolled on, the farm blossomed anew. Crops began sprouting, bright green and full of promise, echoing the laughter that now filled the land. Jacob felt a transformation within himself. Where once there had been a void, now hope flourished. Then one afternoon, as they toiled in the fields, Jacob caught a glimpse of something shiny buried in the soil. Curious, he knelt down, dusting it off. An old locket emerged, glinting in the sun, a treasure hidden from the world for many years. Ryan asked, eyes wide with curiosity, as Jacob opened the locket. Inside were two tiny pictures, him and Lydia. A roaring mix of nostalgia and joy enveloped him. "This was ours," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I gave this to her on our last anniversary." Hannah stepped closer, her expression softening. "You found it. I guess it was waiting for the right moment," Jacob chuckled, securing it safely in his pocket. In that moment, he realized the locket wasn't just a trinket. It symbolized the love that could endure beyond loss. It was a reminder that the past held no boundaries, that it could seamlessly weave into the present. The summer wore on, and with it came harvest time. The trio stood side by side at the farm stand, their hard work now on full display. Neighbors from the town came to see the revitalized farm, their eyes wide with amazement. Jacob felt pride swell in his chest as he explained the fruits of their labor, including the wild laughter that reverberated among the crops. As they handed out produce, a sense of community enveloped them. Once solitary, Jacob stood among friends, laughter mingling with chatter. In the midst of the hustle and bustle, Jacob leaned down to whisper to Hannah, "Thank you for everything." Her eyes sparkled. "No, thank you for sharing with us." As the sun began its descent, casting warm hues across the sky, Jacob felt the world shift. The farm, once so heavy with memory, sparkled anew. And in that golden light, he realized that even the most abandoned places could be filled with life again, with the right people to breathe life back into them. By the end of the day, as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Jacob knew that his heart was no longer alone. The love he had shared with Lydia had transformed, finding new roots within the connections forged on the land they'd cherished together. And so, the three teenagers who had once thought the farm deserted now belonged to its story, a tapestry of history, laughter, and love intricately woven together, rippling like the fields in the summer breeze. They had not just salvaged a forsaken place, they had breathed new hope into a legacy, allowing it to thrive in harmony with the memories that still whispered through the leaves and danced beneath the stars. The sun began to dip beneath the horizon, splashing the sky with shades of orange and purple. Shadows painted the old farm with an eerie stillness, a place where time seemed to stand still. Broken fences surrounded fields now overrun with weeds, and the barn stood forlorn, its red paint chipped and faded. To the casual observer, it appeared deserted, a relic of a forgotten past. But somewhere in the thickening dusk, a pair of eyes watched, vigilant and full of secrets. Three teenagers pulled up to the farm in a rusted hatchback, the engine coughing its last breath as they parked by the crooked fence. They had heard the stories, the ones whispered by friends in the quiet corners of school. Legions of adventurous souls had spun tales of haunted houses, cursed grounds, and buried treasures. Wasting no time, they spilled out of the car, laughter echoing through the evening air. Shouted Alex, his voice filled with an intoxicating blend of bravado and eagerness. Ignoring the signs of neglect, he darted toward the barn, the thrill of the unknown pulling him along like a magnet. Unbeknownst to them, Jacob Carter, the farmer, stood hidden behind the barn, his heart heavy but his senses alert. For years, he had poured his life into this land, nurturing it alongside his late wife, Emily. Together, they had envisioned a thriving farm, the laughter of children bouncing through the fields, but now it felt like a mere shadow of its former self. Inside the barn, the trio squabbled over who would enter first. Dust floated in the shafts of light, cutting through the dilapidated walls, swirling in the air, a testament to the years of silence. To them, it was simply a playground, an adventure waiting to unfold. To Jacob, it was a painful reminder of love lost, a space where the echoes of his past still lingered. Shouted Mia, holding up an old wooden tool, its edges rough and splintered. Ryan laughed, tossing it back into the pile. The laughter rang out carefree, giggly, while Jacob clenched his fists, an instinct nudging him to confront them, to tell them the truth of what they had stumbled upon. Alex called out, clambering onto the driver's seat with vivid excitement, arms thrown wide as he pretended to steer a ship through stormy seas. "This thing is ancient," the laughter echoed, filling the once protective space and jolting Jacob's memories awake, the days spent repairing the tractor with Emily playing games beneath the sprawling oak tree. Stepping closer to the barn, heart pounding, Jacob made a choice. He would not remain a silent guardian. As he pushed the door open wider and stepped into the dim light, his figure cast a long shadow over the trio. His voice boomed, deep and resonant, breaking through the layer of adrenaline and joy hanging in the air. The laughter died instantly. The three teenagers turned, startled, their faces draining of color as the reality of their trespass washed over them. "We were just exploring," Mia stammered, her bravado evaporating in front of Jacob's imposing presence. He echoed, anger and sorrow intertwining in his voice. "You think this place is just some abandoned playhouse?" Matt, the boldest of the group, fumbled for words. "We didn't know anyone lived here." The tension hung heavy, thickening like the dust in the air. Jacob could see the fear mixed with confusion in their eyes. They hadn't intended to encroach on his world. They had simply sought for thrills, unaware of the history buried beneath the surface. Jacob's anger softened, replaced by a dread he carried alone. "You think silence means deserted?" Their eyes widened, caught off guard by the shift in Jacob's tone. Mia took a step closer, hesitating but curious. His gaze dropped to the ground, memories flooding back like a rushing tide. "Emily and I built this farm together. We worked side by side, growing fruits and vegetables, dreaming of a family. But after she died, I lost my way." For a moment, silence enveloped them, the air thick with unspoken understanding. The teenagers shifted their weight, grappling with the reality of the land they had invaded. "I'm sorry," Mia said quietly, empathy flooding through her. Jacob looked up, locked eyes with her. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last to treat this place like a ghost town." As emotions swirled around them, Jacob sensed a change in the air, an opportunity waiting to be seized. "If you truly want to understand, if you want to see what this place meant to me and Emily, then step forward with me." Their eyes lit with intrigue, curiosity battling against the guilt they felt. "Yes," Ryan said, eager determination shining through. Jacob studied their faces, assessing the honesty in their eyes. "All right then," he said, a hint of a smile ghosting his lips. The next day dawned bright and clear, and as the sun spilled warmth onto the earth, the teenagers returned with an energy fueled by purpose. Jacob stood waiting near the barn, tools in hand, ready to breathe life back into the neglected farm. On that first day, the work felt monumental. They pulled weeds from the flower beds that had long been left to fend for themselves, sweat glistening as they dug into the soil. Jacob taught them how to transplant flowers and vegetables, explaining the importance of care and patience. "You have to listen to the land," he explained, kneeling beside them. As days turned into weeks, hard work turned into camaraderie. The property transformed slowly but surely, like the ground itself awakening from a long slumber. Laughter began to weave through the fields again, a haunting melody of voices that had been silenced for far too long. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day under the sun, Jacob found himself sharing stories of his life with Emily. He spoke of the dreams they had shared, the laughter of children ringing through the air, his voice rich with emotion. Mia turned to him, her own eyes shimmering with emotion. "You've brought us in, made us part of something beautiful." As the summer days unfurled, the teenagers became an integral part of the farm. They learned how to plant crops, fix fences, and harvest vegetables. They shared meals at sunset, coming together as friends where once they had been strangers. On one particularly golden afternoon, they unearthed a rusted locket from beneath the roots of an old tree. Jacob took it in his hands, brushing away the dirt. A soft smile crossed his lips as he opened it to reveal a small picture of him and Emily taken on their wedding day. "This was ours," he said softly, nostalgia washing over him. Mia peered closer, her heart swelling with empathy. It's beautiful. Yes, Jacob replied, his voice steady now. Over the weeks, the farm flourished as crops began to sprout from the soil, bright green and full of life. The teenagers had dedicated their energy and enthusiasm to Jacob's dream, transforming the space into something new yet deeply rooted in history. One evening, as they gathered around a bonfire, the sky painted with brilliant stars, they shared stories and dreams for the future. Laughter echoed freely through the night as they roasted marshmallows, the warmth from the fire illuminating their faces. Ryan mused, eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Mia chimed in, we can sell vegetables, flowers, maybe even host events. Jacob watched them, pride welling in his heart. I believe you can do it. You've already breathed life back into this place. As summer turned to fall, the farm hosted its first harvest festival, a celebration of new beginnings and lasting friendships. The townsfolk gathered, intrigued by the transformation happening at Carter's farm. Jacob's heart soared as the laughter filled the air, blending with the smells of fresh produce and home-cooked meals. The teenagers stood behind the makeshift farm stand, brightly colored vegetables proudly displayed in baskets. As visitors arrived, excitement rippled through the crowd. Jacob felt the energy of the place shift, the warmth of connection blooming around him. Amidst the joyous noise, Mia caught his eye and called, "Hey, Jacob." He stepped forward, ready to lend a hand, but he was taken aback by the scene unfolding before him. Lively conversation, children running freely between the stands, and the essence of community now woven through the land. This was what he had fought for, what he had hoped to recreate. As evening fell, the sky painted shades of amber and violet. Jacob found himself reflecting on everything that had transpired. The farm, once a place of sorrow, had transformed back into a living testament of love, hope, and resilience. He turned to the teenagers, watching as they interacted with townsfolk, laughter spilling from their lips. In that moment, he realized that they were no longer just helpers, they were family. They had embraced the spirit of the land, merging their lives with the legacy of his past. As they gathered around the fire that night, preparing for the final evening of celebration, Jacob felt a swell of gratitude. "Thank you all for believing in this place," he said, his voice filled with warmth. Mia smiled brightly, her heart full. "We're just getting started, Jacob." As the fire crackled and embers danced into the night sky, Jacob knew with certainty that the past didn't have to haunt the future. Instead, it could dance alongside it, a mosaic of memories and new beginnings entwined. And as laughter echoed out into the cool evening air, he understood that even the most forgotten places can thrive with life again, if someone chooses to tend to them with love, empathy, and hope. The once abandoned farm now stood vibrant and full, a new chapter beginning in the heart of a place that had always been waiting for someone to listen to, watch as life blossomed once more. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long, jagged shadows across the overgrown fields of an old farm. To passers-by, it looked abandoned, forgotten by time. The farmhouse sat stooped and weary, its windows clouded with dust, and the barn leaned to one side as if straining under the weight of years gone by. Weeds had claimed the vegetable garden, sprawling like wild hair over the remnants of what used to be vibrant rows of tomatoes and peppers. But hidden within this facade was a spirit still alive, and a pair of watchful eyes observed every movement. Rusty pickup truck rolled up the creaking gravel road, the sound rattling through the stillness. Inside were three teenagers, Zoe, Liam, and Emma, full of youthful bravado and the thrill of the unknown. They had heard the rumors, tales of a desolate farm haunted by its past, a place where secrets lay buried, just waiting to be discovered. Eager to experience an adventure, they clambered out, hearts racing with excitement. Liam laughed, motioning to the crumbling barn. Zoe grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Or maybe we'll find a treasure map." They sprinted toward the barn, their laughter echoing through the air, mingling with the cool evening breeze. Unbeknownst to them, Jacob Carter, the farmer, stood hidden behind a tangle of overgrown bushes, his heart heavy as he watched the trespassers. He had spent years laboring on this land alongside his late wife, Clara, building dreams and memories. Now it felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Jacob had retreated into the shadows, choosing solitude after Clara's passing, letting the wild reclaim the fields they once tended together. With each laugh that rang through the air, a fire ignited within him, anger mixed with nostalgia. This land was sacred to him. The teenagers burst through the barn doors, their presence sending dust motes swirling in the light that filtered through the cracks. Inside, they saw remnants of tools, rusted and forgotten, scattered like memories left behind. Emma shouted, lifting an old, broken pitchfork. "What do you think this was used for?" They laughed, oblivious to the weight of history hanging in the air. Jacob felt the tension rise in his chest, the urge to confront them, battling with the yearning for peace. He had thought he was alone, but now these kids had intruded upon his grief. "This place isn't abandoned," he finally said aloud, unable to hold back. The words escaped his lips like a bolt of lightning, breaking through their laughter. The teenagers froze, faces pale, as the sound of his voice echoed against the barn walls. Liam asked, swallowing hard. "I mean, this is my home," Jacob replied, stepping out of the shadows. You think you can just wander in here and play around?" The fear in their eyes surprised him, mingled with confusion. They hadn't come to be malicious, they were just kids looking for excitement. Zoe finally asked, her voice softer, almost trembling. Jacob's heart ached. "The farm was once filled with life, filled with love. My wife and I built it together, but after she passed, I let it fade." Tears glimmered in Zoe's eyes as she processed his words. We didn't know," she whispered. Jacob took a step closer, the air thick with empathy. "You didn't realize that silence can carry echoes of loss." Emma opened her mouth, ready to apologize, but Jacob shook his head. "You've trespassed, but perhaps there's a way to make this right. You want to understand?" Liam asked, the bravado he had entered with now melted away. "I want to restore this farm," Jacob explained, his voice steady. "If you're willing to help me, I can teach you what this land means." They exchanged glances, processing the weight of his words. Curiosity ignited within them. Zoe said suddenly, her optimism lighting the room. Jacob felt a flicker of hope stirring in his chest. "All right then. Come back tomorrow morning." The next day dawned bright and early, the sun cutting through the morning fog. As Jacob stood at the farm's edge, he felt a mixture of anticipation and wariness. The three teenagers appeared, excitement evident on their faces. With every hour that passed, they worked alongside Jacob. They pulled weeds, painted fences, and cleared out the barn that had once echoed with laughter. The raw energy of youth filled the air, blending with Jacob's steady presence. "It's hard work, but it feels good," Liam said one day as they took a break, sipping from their water bottles. "Yeah," Zoe agreed. Jacob watched them, grateful for their enthusiasm. It reminded him of simpler times, moments filled with laughter shared under the wide open sky. As the weeks rolled on, small sprouts began to emerge in the garden. Each day brought new life, and with it, renewed hope for Jacob. The laughter of the teenagers became a melody he never knew he missed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jacob felt a warmth blossoming within him. "Thank you for helping me with this," he said, his voice full of sincerity. Their faces lit up, pride swelling in their chests. "We've learned a lot." "It's amazing to see the changes," Emma said, her eyes sparkling. The bonds they forged took root as they shared meals together, swapping stories between chores. Jacob opened up about Clara, sharing tales of their dreams, adventures, and the love that had blossomed beneath the stars. Liam asked one night, "A million times," Jacob replied, nostalgia flickering in his chest. "Clara and I talked about building a community, teaching kids about farming." "We can still do it," Zoe suggested, excitement bubbling in her voice. "We can help bring people here." Jacob's heart raced at the thought. Could it really be possible? Liam exclaimed. Fueled by a rush of newfound purpose, they mapped out plans for the farm stand, excitedly drawing ideas, brainstorming how to open the land to the community, a place that thrived on the love that had once nourished it. Every day turned into a whirlwind of preparations, from building signs to planting flowers that would frame the farm stand beautifully. Neighbors peered curiously from afar as the transformation took shape, but just as things seemed to flourish, dark clouds rolled in, both literally and figuratively. One night during a heavy storm, they huddled together on the porch, the wind howling through the trees. Emma asked, glancing at Jacob, who remained calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "It will weather the storm, just like everything else," he assured her. The next morning, the world was different. Floodwaters trickled through the fields where crops had just begun to sprout. The storm had wreaked havoc, but the damage wasn't just physical. As they stepped into the wreckage, Jacob's heart sank. The garden lay flattened, the tender sprouts crushed under the weight of fallen branches. Zoe gasped, her eyes filling with tears. Jacob gathered his breath, the weight of despair pressing on him. "I can't let this defeat us," he said, while surveying the destruction. "This is part of farming, it's unpredictable." He turned to the teenagers, determination igniting in his voice. "We'll rebuild." They exchanged thoughtful glances, uncertainty hanging in the air. Liam asked quietly, "Fear of failure can't hold us back," Jacob replied firmly. "It's only in trying that we grow." In that moment, they realized they were no longer just helpers, they were a family forged in resilience. With renewed purpose, they began to clean up the mess, rebuilding from the wreckage of the storm. As they toiled, they talked about their dreams, the inspirations that drove them forward. They shared their fears, their hopes, and the love for their work. With every seed planted anew, they stitched patches of hope back into the fabric of the farm. Week by week, they cultivated not just the garden, but their spirit, a community emerging from the ashes brighter than before. The bond between them deepened as they watched nature reclaim its space. But as the days turned to weeks, an unsettling feeling loomed. Jacob noticed figures lurking at the edges of the property, shadows in the twilight that made his heart race with uncertainty. One evening, he caught sight of them, strangers hanging around the nearby trees, whispering to one another. Anxiety tugged at him. Jacob asked the teenagers as they worked on the barn. Liam inquired, pausing his task. "Those people over there," Jacob replied, pointing toward the tree line. Tension filled the air as they turned to look, immediately spotting the figures slipping back into the shadows. Emma whispered, the unease prickling down her spine. "I don't know," Jacob replied, a knot forming in his stomach, "but we need to keep an eye out." But the following days passed without incident. The The strangers vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the farm in a deceptive calm. However, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The laughter and the work that had once filled the air became tinged with unease. Something dark seemed to be looming in the background. As they prepared for the farm stand's grand opening, the atmosphere shifted. He could sense a change, a brewing storm not just in the skies, but beneath the surface of their newfound camaraderie. On the night before the big event, as they set up decorations and arranged produce, Jacob caught sight of them again, those figures emerging from the trees, watching like shadows. His heart raced, a creeping dread inching closer. He shouted, adrenaline pumping through him. Zoe exclaimed, her eyes darting between Jacob and the strangers. Jacob insisted, urgency threading through his words. They ran into the farmhouse, hearts pounding as they huddled near the window, peering out into the darkness. Jacob could see the figures moving slowly, whispering among themselves, their faces obscured by the dim light. Liam asked, fear lacing his voice. No, let's wait, Jacob replied, determination coursing through him. But before they could gather their thoughts, a sharp crack echoed through the night, a sound that shattered the stillness, sending shockwaves down their spines. Jacob's heart dropped as he recognized it. A sudden jolt of terror coursed through him. Zoe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jacob grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward the door, ready to confront whatever lay in wait. Stay back, he warned them, gripping the light as if it were a lifeline. As he opened the door, a chilling breeze swept around him, carrying with it the scent of rain-drenched earth and something foreboding. He stepped outside, the flashlight beam cutting through the night, searching for any signs of movement. The silhouettes darted between trees, the sound of whispered voices drifting in the air. He called out, steadying his voice despite the tremor in his heart. No answer came, only silence, thick and suffocating. But then a figure stepped into the light, the beam revealing a familiar face. Jacob's breath caught in his throat as he stared into the eyes of someone he never expected to see again, someone who had once said goodbye. Jacob, the stranger called, voice low and filled with something he couldn't quite place. Jacob's heart raced as the world around him shifted, the familiar feeling of the farm now mingling with fear. The boundaries of his peaceful existence slipped, unraveling into a dangerous new reality. Jacob demanded, clenching his fists, unsure of what would come next. The stranger stepped forward, the darkness hanging heavy around them. We've been watching you. With those words, a storm rolled in, dark and foreboding, a cliffhanger hanging in the air. Jacob's world, once so clear, suddenly roared with chaos, and he braced himself for the storm that loomed on the horizon.